My name is Lindsey Christensen, as Stephanie said. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at thoughtbot. And today we're going to be talking about podcasting and business podcasting and whether or not you should jump into the pool. You can find me on Twitter at Lindsey3D. Let's be internet friends. But for now, let's get moving. Before we actually jump into the agenda, I want to know a little bit about you. So we teed up some polls. Stephanie, could we launch the first poll?
The one about go ahead.
Yeah, the one that asks where they are in the podcast life cycle. So,
Perfect.
Do you have a podcast yet?
So, yep. This one is just launched, so definitely answer those questions. We only keep these open for a couple seconds, so you have to answer sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a rapid fire. I'm going to do the second one right after, too.
Oh, I like this. All right, guys, you have a couple more seconds to submit your responses, and then we'll share the results. I'm going to do that countdown again, some of you know.
Yeah.
So,
keep it spicy, interactive.
Oh, yeah. 3, 2, and 1. Okay. And it's closed. All right. I'm sharing the results now, but this is where everyone's standing.
I can't see them.
So the winner is that they are considering to start a podcast by 45%. And then
awesome.
closely behind it is we're just here to learn. And there are 9 people that have had a podcast for less than a year. So kind of a good mixed bag.
I love that. So there's a ton of people here who are thinking about starting one. That's perfect. Can you launch the second one, which is, do you yourself listen to podcasts?
Yeah, definitely. All right. That poll is launched. So definitely give your input. I actually just started listening to podcasts because of the pandemic. I never used to really listen to them. And then I was just looking for something new to do. I was cleaning my house for the 1800th time.
And it's great because you're not looking at a screen, which a lot of us are having.
Oh my God, yes.
Except for
it's awesome.
This is great.
All right, guys, polls are closing in 3, 2, and 1. Sharing results. It looks like actually 48% of people listen to podcasts for pleasure and for work.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and only 7 people have not listened to one. Yeah.
You have context around podcasts, so you know what you like, but you haven't actually done it for your own business yet, which is great. All right, cool. I'll be back for more polling later. Thank you so much. All right, so jumping into the agenda, first thing we're going to go over, don't podcast, just don't do it. It's a trap, totally oversaturated, can't even track the results. And yeah, that's about it. So thanks for coming. I won't be taking any questions. And,
wow, all right then, 8 minutes in, quickest webinar there.
So I will talk a little bit how podcasting can be a trap, but I promise I will continue on. And we'll talk about why you should podcast, if it's right for you, get a little bit deeper into focus, format, distribution, all that in the weeds kind of fun stuff, and then thinking about success, and of course, do some Q&A. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about thoughtbot's podcast, and to do that, it'll be helpful for you to know who we are and who our audience is. So thoughtbot is a product design and development consultancy, and we work with clients to build digital products, so mobile and web products. And we work with everyone from an individual founder with an idea who wants to do some research, validate an idea and bring it to market, all the way to high growth startups, and even enterprise companies that are looking to launch something new or even mentor their teams. So that really spans a wide variety of client types, but our key personas, our buyer personas, are often a non-technical founder or a technical leader. So actually 2 really different kinds of folks. someone who's maybe more on the business side and someone who's more on the technical side. So how does this sort of influence then who our podcasts are targeting? We have currently 3 podcasts that we run. So I'm a co-host of Giant Robots, Smashing Into Other Giant Robots, which is a fantastic name that I can't take credit for. And my co-host is our CEO and founder, Chad Pytel. And Giant Robots is around the design development and especially the business of great products. So that's targeted at a lot of that founder or aspirational founder audience, as well as some product leaders. And Giant Robots is an interview-based podcast. So we have guests on, and then we learn more about their journey and their product's journey and their company's journey. Tentative is our design podcast, and that's co-hosted by 2 of our design leaders here at thoughtbot. And the audience for Tentative is a designer audience, a product designer audience. And the format is not interview-based. It's actually conversational between the co-hosts, and they talk about everything from, what they're working on week to week to catching up personally, and it's really fun and quirky, and you want to be friends with them. Bike Shed is kind of similar, but that's targeted towards our developer audience. So again, we've got 2 senior developers at thoughtbot who check in week over week with each other about what they're working on, what are different trends in technology, maybe something that they messed up. All 3 podcasts are really transparent in talking about what we're learning as we're learning it, what's going well, and also what's going wrong. And this is actually really core to who thoughtbot is. Our purpose is that there's always a better way to do our work, and our job is to find it and to share it with as many people as possible. So you can already kind of tell from our purpose that podcasts are a good channel for us to act on that purpose, to bring that to life, and then to connect with audiences who share those values. In terms of kind of some of the objectives or how these different podcasts play into the business, Giant Robots focus more on that decision maker type of person. I think, we've leveraged more in terms of sometimes trying it out for account-based marketing, whether that's inviting on a guest that is a target or inviting on a guest that we know is an influencer to an account. We think about how we're using it in the context of sales outreach and marketing campaigns. But by and large, we kind of just keep the same ethos of we want to be sharing what we're learning out with the community, and we have access to people with interesting stories that our audience is interested in. With Tentative and the Bike Shed, they're very community-driven podcasts, I would say. So they're kind of speaking to our almost like peer audience or folks who aspire to be our peers. And this has the interesting impact in a couple ways. One is that they speak to people who are influencers to potential decision makers at our clients, potential clients. And then they also speak to people who could work for us. And for anyone who's tried to hire senior developers, it is a major undertaking. It is expensive. It is time consuming. If you have used a recruiter, you know the basic costs there. And these have been successful for us. We've attracted senior level designers and developers, director level folks who have been avid fans of the podcasts. And because they listened to the podcast and felt like they developed relationships with folks they could see being their coworkers, they really wanted to work with us. So that's been a cool outcome to see there. We've also had other podcasts over the years. And I always say like thoughtbot's been doing podcasting since before it was cool. Um, Over the course of all the years of doing it, we've had 3.6 million downloads of the podcasts, which is a pretty impressive number. And on average, we're seeing about 500,000 downloads a year. Bike Shed, I should call out Bike Shed, the technical podcast, is by far our star of the podcasts. They have the most downloads. They have an extremely active audience, mostly on Twitter. So listening to episodes, then at mentioning the hosts are involving them in conversations. They're bringing up potential ideas for other episodes, like really, really awesome active community. And I know like they're one of my podcasts, so I shouldn't like feel competitive that Giant Robots isn't, but whatever, I am. There it is, I said it. And so for some context, downloads don't even include streams also. And here's another thing like that is going to come up again in this presentation, which is podcasts are really hard to track and to understand the metrics around and understand the return on. It's especially frustrating for, I'm a lifelong demand gen marketer, so it pains me to not have like a full view of who these folks are and how they're engaging with all of our content and who turns into clients and things like that. It's a lot more fuzzy area. So you rely on some of these kind of basic metrics like downloads and then interpreting downloads into subscribers and things like that. But there's, I think like a go-to stat is like the top 10% of podcasts get about 3,200 downloads within the first month. And Bike Shed's well above that, and the other ones are just kind of lagging. So we're doing a pretty good job, But Lindsey, you're saying now, you started off by saying podcasting is a trap, and then you told me all these cool numbers. I know, I did. What next? The reason I say podcast, I love having the laugh track, Stephanie. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
The reason I say podcasting can be a trap is because I think a lot of people go into it for lead generation, which is the wrong approach, I think. You're going to get some of my opinions here, obviously. Does it create leads? Sure, yeah, absolutely. Is it the best channel for lead generation? Is it the most reliable? Is it a reliable, scalable growth engine? Not necessarily. You can use it for that, but there are other ways that are much more reliable. And if you're thinking about like growth hacking, if you attended that session today, podcasting probably wasn't brought up, I'm guessing. There are ways to do that online or even in in-person events where you have a much better understanding of that flow. So what is it good for? What are we doing here? I'm taking a dramatic sip. Hold on. Podcasting, thank you. Podcasting is great for brand. Brand, this big, nebulous but important thing that we're all trying to do, this holy grail of marketing. Brand building. Podcasting is amazing for brand building. And it can get you leads, absolutely. But where it really, really shines is brand. And I really sort of associate it with the idea of brand affinity and brand affinity marketing. Wistia right now is talking a lot about brand affinity marketing. So if this is something you're interested in, I'd suggest checking out some of their resources. Wistia, the video startup here in Boston. And basically the idea around brand affinity is that the old methods of really kind of one and done, really fast ways of running an ad, generating leads, converting, those are customers. It's a lot harder to do that now than it used to be. And one of the reasons is like you're battling for attention. It is a battlefield out there. And so how are you going to get people to understand who you are and connect with who you are and stay with you over a long period of time? Because most often you're not trying to just convert someone once or, tell them a story or have their attention once. You're trying to connect with them over a long period of time. You're trying to sustain your business based on your relationships and the value you put in your audience. So podcasting is a great way to do that, to grab the attention of your audience that you're really fighting for. But in that, it takes some investment. So we're going to kind of talk about some gut checks that you might go through to think about whether podcasting is right for you and whether it can help you meet your business objectives and whether you can put out a good one. All right. Should you podcast? All right. So I've got another poll I'd love to run, which is,
all right,
what do you love most about your favorite podcasts? Which could be any kind of podcast.
Awesome. I just launched the poll, the post. Oh, I'm actually really curious to see what the outcome of this one is.
I know,
like
this is secretly just my own market research.
It's a great way to do it right here. I feel like for me, it depends on my mood, like whatever I'm interested in. It's like, am I feeling motivated or lazy? Like, honestly, and then I'll decide
that's
from
a
there.
good point. So what do you love most about your top one favorite podcast, if you can identify it?
All right, guys, polling is closing in 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to share results.
Cool.
Lindsey, can you see the results, or should I kind of verbally let you know?
I can.
You can?
Can you let me know?
So weird. Okay, I will share them with you then. So it looks like the top result. The top result is people love the insights or hot takeaways. However, it was almost head to head with the fascinating stories. Like those two were kind of almost tied. Yeah. And the host personality somewhat plays a role, but not as much as those other two.
Okay. I like that, kind of jives with what I was guessing. Thank you all for pointing that out. This is great.
This is why everyone listens to your podcast. You have a great personality. They're like, let's go and learn about giant robots smashing into other robots.
At giantrobots.fm. Okay. Should you podcast? I would say the number one reason that you should podcast, if you're on the fence, like, is this right for me, is if you have an existing audience that you are trying to strengthen a relationship with. And you'll notice I said you have an existing audience. So again, going back to this idea of you kind of have to be starting with something. So podcasting is not great if you have no audience, if you're starting from zero. People aren't going to find you. It's great if you already have some audience. That could be through your blog, it can be through your newsletter, through your social media accounts, even through your personal social media accounts. You have people who you already have some sort of relationship with, and you want to take it to the next level. That's really important for your business. You want to grow your brand affinity, which then turns into really devoted customers and customers who buy more and customers who refer you. There's all these correlated benefits to that. So you're starting from an existing audience. And again, you're thinking about this idea of battling for attention. It's so hard to get people to focus on what you're saying and understanding who you are. And as marketers, our job is really to make sure people understand our value proposition. Why are we different? And making the connection that we share values with them. Podcasting is an amazing venue to do that, to really let your personality shine through, to go really deep into what's important to you as a company, as individuals, and you'll attract an audience that resonates with, and they'll feel really connected to you. They'll feel like they have this personal relationship with you, almost like you're a friend. And to me, this is kind of the biggest barrier, like protection or moat that your business can have, is to have these dedicated audience that is with you. And, you know, in startups, we talk a lot about the idea of building a movement, you know, that to truly be successful, you have to prove that there is a movement, that you've got this dedicated community. And podcasting can be a great sort of tool in your toolbox as you're building this movement. And in addition to the, you know, in-person and social media and all the other things that you're doing. The second reason why you might want to tell podcasts is you have a really compelling story to tell. Again, this is something that sometimes gets overlooked, surprisingly, is you have to have like really interesting hosts, like the survey we just did. You want to hear fascinating stories, you want to hear hot takes, you want amazing host personalities, right? You don't want a podcast that's essentially like a blog post, you know, top 10 ways to optimize your app. But that's a blog post. It could be a really good blog post. But, you know, fit things where they should go. The podcast is an opportunity for you to like build a narrative, build connection, really lean on personalities, be really different. Again, you're thinking about how to differentiate yourself and make that personal connection. And then the last, or the sort of the third major, I would say, pillar in like, yes, this is the right decision for you, is if igniting your brand values, bringing them to life is critical to you. And to, if you're not the CEO, to the CEO as well. Because I think this is a leadership thing. You have to have buy-in from folks that getting your brand values across to your audience is an important area to invest in and to focus on, because it's going to take time. I think there's a stat that something like you won't know how your podcast is doing until like 15 episodes in. That's a while. And even then, you know, what is success for you? It can be difficult to define. But you'll start to get at that point, you'll start to see, are people tuning in? Are more people tuning in? Are we engaging with them in other ways because of the podcast? And has anyone sort of showed interest in, you know, purchasing or engaging with us professionally as a result as well? Let's see, make sure I didn't miss anything there. Okay. So the next section I'm going to run through is, again, kind of getting now more into the weeds. If those things were all like yeses, yes, I want to, these all totally make sense for me. I have something interesting to say. I want to nurture my audience and I want to bring my brand values to life. Then it starts to get into, okay, like how do we actually do this? And I'm not going to go through sort of the specifics of each of these. Again, those are great blog posts that exist. You can check those out. But I will share some ways to think about them, some questions to ask yourself, again, that can help you follow a path. And for any, you know, marketer or product person who knows their stuff, obviously this is no surprise. Deeply understand who your podcast is for. Who is the person that you are speaking to? What is important to them? Do they listen to podcasts? Where do they listen to podcasts? You know, do the full research. Do your interview work. Do your surveys. You know, get in front of people, build the persona, and then build the podcast for that persona. And then iterate on it, right? Like you'll put it out into the world, test it, learn from it, and then change when you see how it's going, and then improve it. I took an example I like here from Toast, our local folks who build the point of service solutions for restaurants. They have a podcast called The Garnish, which is an adorable name. And, you know, their podcast is not about software for restaurants. It's not about how to increase your operational efficiency of a restaurant, even though that's really what they're selling. Their podcast covers things like addiction in restaurants, lack of healthcare in restaurants, what it's like growing up in a restaurant or being part of a multi-generational restaurant, things like that. Things that are really interesting. They make for great stories. They make for great guests. They connect with their audience. And they're tying it back to shared values that they have, which is like, we really understand what's happening in restaurants and all the powerful work that you do against the odds, and we're here with you. Bonus, I went to take this screenshot and look what they have right under the little featured episode here. My recycling truck's coming down the street, of course, right now, so just enjoy that. They have a listener survey right under their featured podcast episode, which I was like, this is absolutely perfect. And it also explains why they're like doing such an amazing job, right? So I clicked through the survey and they're asking, what are your favorite episodes? Who are your favorite hosts? What's your favorite format? You know, all the things that we're talking about here, so that they can continue to refine the content they're putting out and continue to connect with those customers, potential customers, audience, and align on values. All right, so doing that customer work, that focus, then informs everything else. Your format, your cadence, your channels, your calls to action. For format, your guiding question is, again, how do I create something valuable, engaging, and original? There's no right or wrong answer. Like, it should be an interview podcast. It should be a segmented podcast. You have to figure it out. But if you're thinking about what's valuable and what's original, that's going to help you pick the right one. For cadence, I think for me, what I try to think about and what I recommend is, what is a sustainable pace of releasing episodes that will help you stay in touch with your audience, but also maintain quality. And quality can vary too. It doesn't have to be a professionally edited or produced podcast to be successful by any means. You can do a successful one, you know, just on your laptop. But thinking about, you know, you've done the assessment, how important is this to us to do this brand work and to this audience nurturing, then how much time are we willing to put into it? So, you know, I would recommend either doing weekly, bi-weekly, or seasonal. Anything longer than bi-weekly, you're getting maybe a little bit less reliable in terms of when they can expect it. And definitely would recommend against just doing it kind of like when we can, because folks want to know when it's coming out, when they can talk to their friends again, their podcast friends. For channels, I got a lot of questions about, you know, what are the best distribution methods, what are the best channels to increase my audience. Again, they were kind of veering more towards a little bit of growth hackiness, which for me isn't how I approach podcasts. I think to start with, you got to be understanding, where does your audience already listen to podcasts? Because that's where they're going to listen to you. And then where do you already connect with them? Because that's how you're going to be announcing your podcast. That's how you're going to be reminding them. Then from there are like, okay, you got to be on the, you know, 7 or 8 most popular platforms, you know, the Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast. And then it is helpful, I must say, really helpful to work on your ratings to help you be discoverable. So if you get high ratings, you're going to show higher for the kinds of the key terms that people are searching for. But by and large, people are finding you either because they already know you or because someone's recommending you. And someone's recommending you because you're putting out awesome content that aligns with their values. Yeah. All right. Calls to action. This is a little bit more where you can start to like maybe think about, all right, now we're getting a little more into buyer's journey funnel land. Where can your audience learn more about this awesome stuff? And maybe that's your website. And hey, maybe on your website, you've got opportunities to do other things that might lead to products and services. Wink. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about CTAs. Getting a little short on time here. Take another dramatic sip. Okay, so next we're going to talk about success. And I think we actually might have a question, an audience question.
We do. I'm going to bring in Anthony Franklin in. So Anthony, this is your heads up because I'm promoting
Hi,
you.
Anthony
So we're going to give him a second to rejoin here in a moment. And then Anthony, let us know once you can hear us. Like, give it a second. Looks like he's muted still. Bear with us, guys. It'll take like 1 second, and then if he doesn't pop up, I'll ask the question on behalf of him. Promise. And then, okay.
Oh, okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Perfect. Okay. So, Anthony, the stage is yours. Ask away.
Hi. Okay, so hi. My name's Anthony Franklin. I'm the VP of Sales at Portformer, and we are a software company. We use machine learning to help independent financial advisors and wealth managers to use software to make better, unbiased recommendations for their clients. So anyway, the question I had for you was, we've been thinking about podcasting, and, you know, I wanted to talk and get your thoughts on what's, you know, the difference between being a featured guest on a podcast and hosting your own podcast. So what are the returns on investment? What's the difference? And are there certain times you should consider one over the other?
Yes, that is a great question. Thanks for asking. The easiest, quickest ROI is actually to be a guest on someone else's podcast. They've already done all the hard work of building the audience, building up the trust. And then if you're able to come in as a trusted guest and expert on that podcast, you know, a few awesome things are happening. You know, for one, you're able to come in with a call to action to maybe, you know, visit your own content or visit your own product. But two, they're probably a completely new audience to you as well. So people might be hearing from you for the first time and having that sort of aha moment that they could use your product. And this is something we've definitely seen. I've, you know, had applied our CEO to be on popular podcasts for entrepreneurs. And we've had good success with that, seeing, you know, people come directly from that. You know, we ask on the form, how did you hear about us? And they'll say, you know, I heard your CEO on this podcast, and I thought I'd love to learn about working with you. So quick and easy, less work, get on someone else's podcast that's really popular. However, that said, I would say hosting your own podcast can have a compound return on investment. So it's going to take longer, but you own the audience and you maintain the relationship. And over time, I believe you will see a higher return on the lifetime value of those customers as they continue to engage with you in your content, and then also with your products and services and those referrals that I mentioned before. Okay,
that makes sense. And one other follow-up question too is, so if you wanted to be a guest on a podcast, what's that process look? Where do you start?
So herein lies a little bit of the catch, actually. It's a lot easier to get on a podcast as a guest if you have one. You have some of that credibility already built up. I know. But so you should, first of all, the person you're pitching should be whoever has like the most thought leadership clout at the company. Most often that's the CEO. And also having examples of speaking, and especially speaking about relevant topics to that podcast. So it could be like, you know, speaking at a meetup or a conference. It could be other guest episodes on different kinds of podcasts. But you essentially put together like a little PR pitch, and they'll usually be some kind of contact. You know, usually not form. It's usually like an actual email that you can reach out to if the podcast is guest-based. And, you keep it short, like 2 paragraphs. Here's why this person would be great on your podcast. Mention a specific episode that you listened to and that you resonated with, and then a couple examples of them speaking. And then, I'd love to talk about this further. And that's sort of the go-to pitch.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Anthony.
That was great. All right. So moving on, what is success? Are you ready? I've got all the answers for you.
I'm so excited for this.
It depends. Boo.
Of course.
Yeah, I really, racked my brain to be like, here's some like great guidelines for, how to measure if your podcast is being successful. And the long and short of it is you can't do it. It really depends on what makes sense for your business. What are your goals? And can podcasting feed those goals? I mentioned if your goal is you want a ton of new product activation, starting your own podcast may not be the best avenue for that. If your goal is to, create thought leadership in a niche area by telling really interesting stories, that's absolutely a great fit. Using the podcast to engage with target accounts, I think that's a possibility. Using the podcast to ingratiate yourself to folks who might want to work with you one day, I think that's a great way to do it. You really just have to treat it like any kind of marketing campaign, although I would say with a much longer timeline, and say, what do we hope to see, and how are we going to check in on that? And, I wouldn't be surprised if along the way you may even think you're trying to see one thing and you end up hearing something else. You end up getting really valuable anecdotal feedback about how people are engaging with your podcast that maybe is helping your business even in a different way as it relates to your brand. And again, making those long-term connections, getting people's attention, growing that affinity, and helping your business be successful. That's all I got for you right now. Check out my podcast.
I'm going to put the link to your podcast right now in the chat. And Lindsey, just because we do have a couple minutes here, I do have one question that I think a lot of people could also could benefit from it. So some of the people here are newer to the podcast, part of startup companies that have like a bootstrap budget. Do you have any best practices like for promoting your podcast with a limited budget?
Yeah, again, I would say not to necessarily focus on the promotion. Hopefully you're starting with an existing audience that you communicate with in some way that's already within your budget. So your blog, a newsletter, your social media, and then you're introducing your podcast as another way for them to engage with you. Things that your budget will likely go to, probably some lightweight editing, whether you're doing that yourself, which is totally possible. You can also hire a freelancer, and that can range anywhere from like $40 an episode for really basic editing, all the way to like $300 an episode for really sort of like full service editing, production, publication. And then what the platforms that you're getting set up on.
Gotcha.
I should also
mention,
I can't stop the workshop without a shout out to our longtime producer, Tom Obarski, who is an absolute podcasting boss and makes us sound much smarter than we really are.
That is awesome. Maddie, I don't know if you've been checking out the comments, but everyone here is just saying what a wonderful person you are and how informative this has been.
Oh my God,
sorry,
no.
Word vomit.
Send me the comments.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, you have a great sense of humor and this has been super informative. So Thank you so much, Lindsey, so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And to everyone on this, I did drop the link for the next event that is coming up here in 15 minutes, all about getting more website conversions without increasing your traffic. So a great way to kind of extend your marketing bootcamp experience. All right, guys, thank you so much. And thank you again, Lindsey. Really appreciate your time.